Manju. Thank you so much. Thank you. And so, wow, what a way to start the morning. Those of you that didn't catch it at the beginning, you missed quite a bit, but I'm sure you were able to catch some of it. So that was Manju Kone treating us to fantastic music and songs from the Mali Empire, from Burkina Faso, from Mali, from Guinea, and all those areas. The first song was a tribute to King Sundiata Keita, the Lion Prince of Mali. So welcome. We're going to let you go. We're going to let Manju get on with her day. She has a class to teach at a college, so she's going to run. Thank you again, Manju. Let's show her some love, please.
Thank you.
And we understand there's a little bit of a glitch. And so some of you, when you log in, you might see your name coming up as Megan, and which is a beautiful name for a lot of you. So that's okay. But if you really want to be identified as yourself, you can either right click on your video or hover your cursor over your video, click on the three dots above your, to the right side of your left side of your head, and rename yourself to your real name. So we're going to keep hopefully making that announcement as we proceed. So I'm going to turn this back to our wonderful young lady, Almaz Negash, to lead us through. Thank you, Almaz.
TK, thank you always for being there. Thank you, my brother. I am so happy to see you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Almaz Negash. On behalf of all of us at the African Diaspora Network, I welcome you and I thank you for being with us. We've been doing this. This is the fourth one. We started in July, the African Diaspora Investment Symposium, our flagship event. Due to COVID is now being given to all of you on a monthly basis, thanks to our funders. We're not charging, and I want to give absolute thank you and gratitude to each and everyone who has been supporting us, and we are really supported very well by the wonderful funders and friends of the ADN, and I want to give a shout out today to the U.S. Africa Development Foundation, CD Glean. Thank you. I see you. Even though your name says Elizabeth, you are CD. I just watched that, and I want to thank you for everything you do. Your team, I love Elizabeth and everyone. And so really thank you for the support that we've received. We will announce formally that support we received from the USADF. They are also pretty much sponsoring for the first time the Builders of Africa's Future, the 10 or 11 that we will select. They will actually get financial support. And this is an incredible gift to our community, but especially startups in Africa. So I really want to start by saying thank you to our funders, because I think sometimes we think that we could do this on our own, but we can't. Megan, also delighted to have Megan as our program manager, just a delightful human being, joining ADN full-time. So we do have now a pretty well put together team, Deborah, Caroline, Dan, Yinka. We're good, we work hard, but we try to put this together, and that requires support, financial, moral, intellectual, and I'm happy to say that we do get it from our funders, from our board, from our team, from our champions, and really people like you who are a part of this network. I wanted to also shout out to a anonymous donor, a diasporan who does not want to be known, but he gave a major donation to ADN, and whoever you are, you know who you are, so thank you. I want to thank also to the many funders. You can see them on our website. Megan, we shared that with you. This morning, special thank you to the Honorable Paula Ngabire. I have been trying to get you for so many years, and I'm so happy. You know, the upside of Zoom is we can get you from Rwanda to join us because over the last 2 years that we tried, my friend Ilian and I, it was not possible because you had other things to do. So the first fireside chat will be between the Honorable Paula Ingariba. She makes us so proud. And of course, my wonderful brother, C.D. Glean. Then it will be followed by a panel session with Saida. Thank you, Saida, for your help. Well, not only just for being a moderator today, but also for being so helpful with selecting the builders, the 2021 Builders of Africa's Future, with all the support he gave to Michael and to us as a whole. Thank you very much. Timothy and Zioka, thank you, welcome. And Kessa Were, I know a lot about AfriLabs, thanks to the African Union. They speak so highly of you, and we're very delighted to have you. And my youngest brother, Rui Emmanuel, thank you and welcome. I will shortly leave this forum to the speakers, but I want to make sure that throughout the convening, I ask each one of us to mute and then also use chat as much as possible, because I think there's tremendous energy that we're seeing through chat. Use it to connect with each other and to support each other. We will do a poll sometime in between after CD and the Honorable Paula finish up their conversation. This is being recorded, so we want to share that with all of you. For anything that has to do with the media, any questions that you have in PR, please contact Liz Grossman Kitoi. She's here and she will be happy to answer any questions that you have. And please keep in touch with us, join us and support the organization, because we do need your support. For those of you who filled up the survey, our scientific survey, I thank you. Those of you who haven't, this is your last chance, and we will share that link. And please do fill out the form, because we do need your insight in order to support you better. I wanted to say that we also have a 10 to 10:30 networking opportunity, and you are welcome to stay. It's not mandatory, but for those of you who want to have an informal networking opportunity, this is a great thing. I want to end by saying this, and the African Diaspora Investment Symposium, for those of you who have joined us the last 5 years in person, you know it's really a magical place where things happen. This morning, what I wanted to mention is the first initiative that took place as a result of the 2016 convening was Gabeya. Gabeya it means in Ethiopian language, Amharic market. It started because of Huri, one of our speakers, and another brother, Amadou Dafi. They connected, their team connected at the event, and they created Gabeya. So really what we do matters, what we do creates incredible things. Gabeya today is one of the largest knowledge sharing platform in Ethiopia, and also it's growing in other parts of the continent. So I just want to say, let's not take each other for granted. You know, you don't know who is next to you. Just take that as an opportunity to connect with each other and to support each other. So with that, I'm going to call in CD Glean and the Honorable Paula Ingabire to take on the stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Almaz. My dear and dynamic sister, thank you so much. You embody the resilience and the ability for Africa, America, for the world to bounce back better as of COVID. I was with you almost a year ago in Silicon Valley. And now the fact that you have been able to put together this virtual convening, just congratulations to you, the entire ADN network. No, it's fantastic.
Thank
you for organizing. Really, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this important and timely fireside chat discussion focused on building innovative ecosystems in Africa and the role of public-private partnerships in advancing local economies and fostering innovation. According to venture capital firm Paratech, Africa and African tech startups raised $1.1 billion in equity funding in 2018. That's a 108% year-over-year growth. And these startups are clustering in nearly 450 African tech hubs that dot the continent. In 2019, the global System for Mobile Communications Association, better known as GSMA, estimated that the number of active tech hubs providing support for tech and digital entrepreneurs has risen to nearly 620 throughout Africa. So USADF, interestingly, we at the U.S. African Development Foundation are focusing our efforts on integrating digitization into our grant activities. And we understand that by digitizing the business operations of African enterprises we work with, we boost their business growth, build resilience, and supercharge them for the fourth industrial revolution. And ultimately, USADF is looking at how to more effectively use its core resources and competencies to improve its program delivery and deepen its impact, including enhancing the sector's competitiveness and increasing agricultural productivity throughout the value chain. The use of ICT tools will help us reach this aspirational endeavor. But more importantly, the continent's digital transformation is full speed, and nowhere is truer than in Rwanda, where the government is an active sponsor for and supporter of information and communications technology, ICT, and has worked diligently to create an enabling environment for entrepreneurs and tech hubs to thrive. For instance, the country offers an entrepreneur visa, free spaces for entrepreneurs to work from, steady rule of law, and a quick registration process for businesses. For technology startups throughout Africa, Rwanda is becoming the test kitchen of Africa. 5 years ago, Rwanda had little 4G coverage, but today that number has reached over 95%. With that said, I'm honored to welcome and acknowledge the Honorable Minister, Paula Ingabire, for your commitment to digital transformation and leadership in spurring innovation in Rwanda. As the Minister of ICT and Innovation in Rwanda, the Honorable Minister has propelled Rwanda forward in its adoption of fourth industrial revolution tools. She's the coordinator of the Kigali Innovation City Project, a flagship program of the government designed to nurture and strengthen a Pan-African innovation ecosystem in Rwanda. She's part of Girls in ICT Rwanda and has been at the helm of Transform Africa, a platform that brings together innovators and policymakers across Africa to shape Africa's digital transformation agenda. In March of this year, Honorable Minister Ingabire was named among 115 Young Global Leaders of the Year 2020 by the World Economic Forum, WEF. In 2019, she was named among the top 20 of the world's 100 most influential people in digital government by Apolitical. Minister Ingabire serves on the Global Council of the World Summit Award Board of Directors, the World Economic Forum Cybersecurity Board, the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution Global Network Advisory Board, and the WEF Board of Trustees. I just take this honorable time to really welcome the Honorable Minister of ICT and Innovation, Minister Paula Ingabire. You're welcome, Minister.
Thanks, Sidi. Thanks for having me here. And thanks, Almaz. We're meeting virtually, but I hope one time, we will definitely meet in person, and I'll meet all these lovely people that will be speaking together this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you, Sidi.
Thank you so much, and welcome again. As Alma said, COVID has had created many challenges, but it's created an opportunity for us to meet and for you to share the wonderful success story of the transformational change that's happening in Rwanda to many people in different ways through this virtual platform. So let me start. Honorable Minister, when you were appointed Minister of ICT, innovation was also added. What has your journey been over the last 2 years, and what impact has this addition to the Ministry of ICT of Innovation had on your roles, responsibilities, and priorities?
Thanks, Sidi. Maybe just as a start, when I joined the ministry, as you rightly said, innovation was highlighted as a mandate that we were taking on as a sector. But even before I did join, there were different, pockets of teams across government that were focused on some of, how they can promote innovation across the board. But I think it was a natural combination to bring ICT and innovation together as we think about the solutions that we create, whether it's for how we improve government service delivery, how we, how businesses, create, data-driven business models. But I think what we've also noticed 2 years down the road has been that innovation is not necessarily we're not just going to look at it as an ICT thing or just focus on digital innovations. And so what we've been trying to do is how do we think about more broadly innovation, whether it's digitally enabled or not, for us to be able to tap into this creative talent that we have within the economy. And that has pretty much also driven the thinking around the innovation policy that is now under development to ensure that it doesn't come out heavily biased towards how we promote digital innovations, and then we leave out the other kinds of innovations that are really necessary if we're really going to be a knowledge-based economy as we have laid out in our vision for Rwanda. So down the road, beyond the policy, it's also been thinking about some of the institutional arrangements and how we restructure to have the right teams on board to drive that mandate. Even thinking beyond the policy that is in the pipeline, beyond putting teams in place, what are some of those quick wins that we can focus on as a country that will really showcase that we're being very deliberate and intentional at how we promote innovation. And I'll just give 2 examples. One of them, of course, is the Startup Act that is also under development, but also that is building off our proof of concept strategy. And you did mention it, DC, in your introductory remarks about Rwanda being a test bed. And really that's what we want to be, but not just a test bed where the kind of solutions that are being created are only created by Rwandans. We want to be a test bed that is attracting talent from across Africa to come and work together here, provide the necessary conducive environment, and then these solutions that they are building, because you have a diverse team of innovators and entrepreneurs coming together, will allow to build solutions that not only respond to Rwanda's challenges, but solutions that can be exported outside of Rwanda. The other thing that we're testing now is what we're calling procurement for public sector innovation, innovation for public sector procurement. And why is that important? Primarily for Rwanda, and I think that happens across the board, is that you find that government is still the largest consumer of some of these innovations that we're talking about, and more so digital innovations. So until we disrupt the way we procure some of these solutions, because typical of any government, when we tender, first of all, when we tender, we put out a tender, we're looking for tested and tried solutions. So where does that leave our startups? Where does it leave our innovators who are actually, we've given this test bed to try and create some of these solutions? And sometimes when we're also tendering, which we've seen typically, is we're looking for a solution, but I think what we should be doing is how do we tender a problem? And then we get all these amazing ideas of how we can respond to this challenge, and it's a way of really inspiring innovation. So I'll pause there, but really these are some of the things that have been happening, and as a reflection of the last 2 years, what we're seeing is that even the ratio of entrepreneurial support organizations, this is incubators, accelerators, is really growing, where you have at least 1 to 20, one entrepreneurial support organization per 20 startups in place. And so the more it grows, then the more we put in place the capacity and the support programs that can nurture our innovators and entrepreneurs.
Honorable Minister, that's so inspiring and so important as you've expanded the perspective and the thought process around what is innovation, not only product innovations, but moving beyond, how you follow that with real policy, the Startup Act, and the looking at public procurement, and then really being a draw for the continent. You know, yes, it's Rwanda for Rwandans, but Rwanda for ICT and digital transformation across the continent, and being that test bed. Very, very inspiring. Honorable Minister, let me take you back. From 2002, your main focus had been around developing infrastructure to increase countrywide broadband access. And now that 98%, I want everyone to hear that, 98% of Rwanda has coverage. What does that mean for the average Rwandan?
Thanks. That's a very good question. And I like that you pointed out that statistic because it's been giving us sleepless nights. And I'll tell you why.
Success brings challenges, Honorable Minister.
A great statistic to have because 98% means you're having coverage for, 98% or, geographical coverage for our population. But what we are not saying is a commensurate figure to usage and adoption. And this is why I say it's been giving us sleepless nights, and we've been thinking, how do we move away from the current 69% internet penetration that we have so that it's commensurate to the coverage that we have, because there's that gap. And I think when we talk about digital divide, these are some of those glaring statistics that you look at. And when you look at that bracket of people that are still not able to take full advantage of these infrastructure investments that we've made, then we go back to the drawing board of understanding what do we need to do differently, because it's not just a question of investing in infrastructure, because that really infrastructure is a highway. It's now thinking, what do we need to do to make these people capable of using it? Is it just a question of willingness to use it? Is it just a question of, do we have the right skills? Do we see value for it? And so it's a multifaceted approach that we're really trying to test right now to ensure that that gap of 20% that is not using this infrastructure that we're putting in place is able to do it, but also to use it in a meaningful manner. That's an important thing to highlight. And right. So what we're looking at is things like content is everywhere. Why are people not using it? Have we created the right content that makes it enticing for the average Rwandan to be on the internet, to even buy a tool like a smartphone or any other device that will allow them to access these services. And this is reflected in our focus over the last years of making sure we have one single platform where all government services can be provided and made available to every citizen across the board, wherever they are. Now, we were mindful that not all of them will have devices, and not all of them will also have skills. So part of bridging that gap and ensuring that the divide doesn't happen, we're putting services online, but there are many people that still won't be able to access them, mainly because they don't have the skills or the tools, is how do you create an agency network within the communities that still allows them to access government services through this platform, but also using digital tools. The other thing that we focused on is on the skills aspect. So I just finished on the content. I mean, there's many other services that are being digitized and processes just to ensure that we have localized content that makes sense for someone. Whether it's hospitals, today we have a partner, Babel, who is offering, fast care services to our patients. How many of our people can afford to get on a phone call and talk about how they're feeling and get a prescription without necessarily lining up at the nearest healthcare center, but also and easing that burden on the healthcare infrastructure. So these are all digitization efforts that are ongoing. It's never something that we do once and for all. It's always going to happen. We'll gradually improve on the services, build new services, but this is what will make sense for any average Rwandan to be online and using this internet. Then the other part I want to talk about is around skills. We've created the Digital Ambassadors Program, mindful that even while the literacy levels in themselves are still low, digital literacy statistics are very, we're around 15%. So if you want to become a knowledge-based economy, you want to be a digital economy, and you leave behind the aspect of building digital literacy skills, then you're not empowering the citizens to have the right tools, even skills to be able to access some of this content you're giving them. And lastly, just to close on that, so there's content, there is skills. What we're also looking at is affordability, which is key. So for many of these people, yes, they may see the value for the services you're putting online, they may have the skills, but if a bundle of internet is still expensive for them, 1 megabyte is still expensive for them, given their income levels, then it's going to be difficult for them to really benefit from these kind of programs we're putting in place. And so it's a mix of how do we have community hubs, whether it's schools and hospitals that we are connecting. We have public Wi-Fi for those people that won't afford to pay for it, but it's also having subsidies that we discuss with our different operators to lower the cost of internet so that it's easily affordable for everyone. And naturally, of course, devices becomes the next thing. We've been talking about not asking people to pay for services, but bundling a service. So you get a phone, you have the internet, you have data, you have voice, and so you feel like you're paying for a service as opposed to paying for a device.
No, that's really, really important. And I love that you went back and sort of said, yes, the 98% coverage is great, but we're not resting on our laurels, and it's not enough. That the government recognizes that infrastructure is not enough. And you shared with us the importance of content, but also skills and affordability, because this usage and adoption is critical. So building on that foundation of infrastructure and the content, skills, and affordability, that seems like a Herculean task for any country, any government, but you have some successes. And can you share some of the examples of the emerging innovative technologies, maybe in health and agriculture or education, that are really impacting, going back to this, impacting the daily life of Rwandans throughout the country?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I'll start off even with one key example. I mean, you mentioned health and agriculture, and I'll probably start off with agriculture, where we've been discussing with the Ministry of Agriculture to put in place. One, we had a market, it was a mobile-based system that empowers farmers to make informed decisions on market pricing. And so that was really the starting point of how do we put the relevant tools in the hands of our farmers. But over time, it evolved into being able to create a platform that could link and empower the farmers in how they access fertilizers, input, pesticide, but at the same time, how they can also access low-cost financing to sort of keep them going as they go about their different businesses. And so we didn't want just to look at how do we connect you to the value chain, but also how do we tackle the most important issue, which is around financing that is needed. And it's really usually small amounts of financing that our smallholder farmers are looking for. And how do you sort of integrate that so that it creates value for them? They can access financing, but at the same time, through that financing, it will give them the linkages to these different input fertilizers that they are required to have. On the healthcare front, what we also continuously see beyond the telemedicine infrastructure that of course we've put in place is how do we move towards a strategy of having one single record per citizen. And so regardless of how many healthcare workers or practitioners you're going to be meeting, how do you have one record? And that record that you have ownership over, and you decide which healthcare practitioner or provider will have access to it, so that you also minimize the cost of healthcare, because you don't have to do multiple tests if some of these can be, the results can be shared across the board. And as we move into the education aspect, which is one area that we are also focusing most, because to build our human capital development, you cannot disintegrate that from how are you using technology to improve learning outcomes. While we started with putting in, some of these devices in the hands of our students, we also quickly realized that we needed to follow that up with digitizing learning content, building the skills of the teachers, but at the same time ensuring that the students, as they're coming out of the entire education value chain, they're coming out with these digital literacy skills, but also they're using these two ICT tools as a way to improve their learning outcomes, which is very important because you cannot just depend on classroom type of setup and learning that is really needed. And the other aspect I would want to touch on, of course, I needed to mention something on healthcare because you talked about emerging technologies. Yeah. I think you probably already read a lot about how Rwanda has been using drones to transport blood products to some of the remote healthcare facilities across the country. And so this, again, was one of those proof of concept ideas, very cognizant that there were no regulations in place. There were so many concerns about using drones and flying drones, but also there was a glaring need in our, that we were faced with, which was how much time does it take us to transport medical products to all these healthcare facilities so that they can have timely intervention? If we're able to cut down the cost and the time, then we're also empowering our frontline workers to really respond adequately. And so these are some of the examples I wanted to share. And the last one, of course, is SMEs will always be the backbone of any economy. And I think you also did allude to it. How are we thinking about digitizing SMEs? It's really not just a question of everyone having a website. It's having one common marketplace that allows for all the SMEs to have a level playing field for citizens to be able to access some of their products. The lockdown has exacerbated the demand for some of these digital platforms, where even when we went through these lockdowns, everyone was like, how do we continue to survive? How do we continue to have access to some of the products that we're looking for? But more even thinking about empowering citizens with the ability to push for a cashless economy, and breaking down those barriers around financial inclusion. And so, I mean, there's so many examples that we could share with around that, but I think this is some of the progress that we've started to register, thanks to the infrastructure investments that have already been made, and now really going sector by sector to understand how do we leverage these infrastructure investments to now create products that will respond to the average Rwandan.
No, and I think that, Mensa, thank you so much for that. It's so inspiring. And I know everyone listening is just, bubbling with sort of ideas and energy around what we really see happening across Rwanda. And I just want to commend you for the focus around the use in a meaningful way. Often when we think about technology and ICT, it feels very high level for those beyond the middle class and those who can afford a smartphone, whether it's a Samsung or iPhone or Huawei or whatever. It seems like it's not for the average African or the average Rwandan. And all of the solutions that you have shared really impact people's lives in a meaningful way. And even around citizen empowerment and citizen engagement, it's really, really important. So I definitely think we should take from this that ICT, yes, when we think about innovation in ICT, we can think about innovative technologies that are novel and that are shiny and that are flashy and that are using drones to deliver messages, or in your COVID response, robots for patient care in hospitals, but also that those technologies, not only are they novel and interesting, but they're useful, that they're really impacting the lives of people across the continent and across the country. And also the test bed idea that Zipline, as you mentioned, now has moved and expanded from Rwanda, and I think the government of Ghana is also using and working with Zipline. So that desire to be a test bed, that kitchen of technology innovation for Africa is coming true. And I know that. I spent a lot of time in East Africa and lived in Kenya before coming back to the U.S. with USADF. So just really, really thanks for not only focusing on the infrastructure and the innovation, but also how do those things really impact the lives of your people, and which is so critical. So let me move to a higher level, because you are thinking about this holistically. And with the Smart Rwanda Master Plan being launched 5 years ago, a goal was set to move Rwanda from an agricultural-based economy, and your first example talked about agriculture and financial access, but to move Rwanda from an agricultural-based economy to a knowledge-based economy. And just share a little bit more, you touched on it, but share a little bit more about how that is going and what have been some of the challenges of moving an entire economy from the backbone of what the continent, most people earn their livelihoods. Somewhere 70% of all Africans earn their livelihoods somewhere along the agricultural value chain. And Rwanda is trying to shift that, still trying to build up agriculture, but shift the economy from agricultural-based to knowledge-based. What are some of the challenges and successes that you've had with this great Smart Rwanda Master Plan?
So just to start, I think some of the challenges I had sort of alluded to them earlier. I think one of them was, of course, just understanding the gap that is between, what we see as statistics for coverage versus the actual usage and penetration rate. And of course, that was always a factor of, the cost of devices, of services and everything. The other bigger challenge, of course, was the low rate of digitally literate citizens. And so in as much as you're creating the solutions and the digital tools, if the literacy levels were also still very low, it was a question of how do we quickly build these literacy levels so that they're able to gain from these tools that we are putting in place. But I think one of the challenges that I feel I would also point out that probably we didn't quickly see even in putting together Smart Rwanda, because it's registered a lot of progress, even in terms of how the openness, the culture around understanding the role and use of ICT in really driving the economy. And even as we talk about moving it from an agriculture-based to a knowledge-based, I think the key question is, how are we using knowledge and information that is at our disposal to create more results in some of these sectors that are really driving our economy, and agriculture was one of them. So it would still remain as a major driver of our growth, but how do we embed that with innovation so that the kind of agriculture that we are seeing, the productivity is growing because we've learned how to use data beta. We're looking at deploying some of these smart irrigation systems. And so, and we're thinking about a small country like Rwanda, how do we make sure that we're able to get the most yield on a very small piece of land? And so that has a lot to do with the amounts of data that we're collecting, sensors, the irrigation that we're doing, the kind of quality of inputs and fertilizers and seedlings that we're putting in place, and just even really thinking through the harvesting and eventually connecting to the market. But the one thing I could say is really around data. And this is really going to be our focus even going forward, because data is now the lifeblood of this digital economy that we are all painting for ourselves as a country, as a continent, as a global family. And so that data is not going to be better exploited for the financial industry, the healthcare industry. It's also some of these traditional industries like agriculture, where we start to see, I think, as you may have noticed, a few months ago, we launched a satellite agency. And one of the key focus areas is how are we going to be benefiting from this satellite imagery that is being collected to inform some of the decisions we make, some of the interventions that we make in increasing the agricultural yield and the productivity. And so this has been, I think by and large, it's really the ability to analyze and make use of this data in ways that have been unprecedented before. And that is going to be our focus even going forward.
No, that's really, really insightful and important as we think about the success that you've had, but the challenges that you see and the opportunity with data. I want to stay on this a little bit because you mentioned the content and the skills and affordability. And when you mentioned affordability, that goes to your point around data and accessing data bundles. But talk a little bit about Connect Rwanda Challenge and really affordability of devices. Let's talk about, like, at the end of the day, the African continent, most people are not doing what a lot of us are doing in the US, which is on our laptops or our home desk computers and accessing internet from our home. Most people are accessing internet from their phone. And talk a little bit about how Rwanda is looking at that as an opportunity to impact people's lives, but to brand itself and really create manufacturing opportunities.
So when Connect Rwanda started, again, it started from the premise of thinking, how do we make smart devices affordable for the average Rwandan? That was really the thinking. And so we sat together with our telecommunication companies and said, look here, we want to drive uptake of all these investments that are being made. But at the end of the day, the smartphone is the basic tool at a bare minimum that needs to be in the hands of this average Rwandan. What can we do differently from the existing models that we are seeing on the market that will allow for even more growth of smartphone and eventually smart device penetration? And just to give you a bit of context, right now we're at about 15% smartphone penetration. And this is, and so when you look at it, what it means is that even as we digitize all the services, as we go digital in all forms, thanks to COVID, remote working has become the norm. At the end of the day, that means there's a big percentage of Rwandans that are still going to be left behind without being disrupted by the pandemic, if they don't have the right devices, the right tools in their hands. And so when it started, it was really more to mobilize the awareness and sensitize Rwandans about it. And so many, entities, organizations were pledging thousands of phones, and we were looking for, again, back to the point of data that I was talking about. We went back and said, we have all this household data that we've collected. Let's put it to use. Let's be able to identify which are some of these households that will never in the next 5 years be able to own a smartphone, given their income levels that they have. And let's target and put it in their hands, but also put it in a way that creates value for them. So it's not just a device where they think they'll just make phone calls, but it's already preloaded with some content and that is going to help them going forward. But over time, as we evolved, and this is the beauty about ICT and innovation, is that you learn not to be very prescriptive when you have the very initial idea of what you're trying to achieve, but rather to build in a lot of room to respond to what is happening on the ground. So what happened, interestingly, is that for many of these low-income households, when we got to them, some of them either were not connected to the grid. And so if you're giving them a phone, you're almost saying every week you need to have a certain amount of money available for you to be able to charge this phone and continue to use it beyond even the costs for voice and data services. And so in realizing that very quickly, what we did was now to go back to all these energy companies, whether it's the grid company or even solar companies, because those are the majority that are going to rural areas, and saying, can we bundle these services? Can we make sure when you put a solar home system in a household, we're doing it together with a phone? And then when we create a refinancing model, it's catering not just for the solar home system, but it's also looking at the smartphone. And then we went a little bit ahead and said, we need to have TVs. And this idea came in when we went through COVID and the lockdown, and realized that for many of these households in rural populations who may not have access to internet now, TV was the next best form of making sure students continue to learn, but not many people had TVs. And so we started to say, okay, we're going to bundle. Yes, it's becoming many services and devices, but at least it opened our eyes to really what are some of those basic tools that we think any household should have at a bare minimum. And of course, gradually you can start to expand on that. And so this is how Connect Rwanda has evolved. We have a gap of at least making sure we connect about 2.4 million households. We're very confident that that should be achieved if we design the right models that are bundling this smartphone, this smart TV with an income generating activity that still allows them to be able to pay back the cost of these devices and the services that we're providing.
No, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I thought it was really important for all of us to hear more about how Connect Rwanda is evolving and how you are looking at bundling of services, and also made in Rwanda technology, really, really important and inspiring. I want to quickly turn to the audience and remind you and ask you, please prepare some questions or put questions in the chat for the Honorable Minister. I have one more question, then I'm going to turn to audience questions. And my last question directly, Honorable Minister, is really, we've talked and heard about these innovation hubs in Rwanda and across the continent. And can you share what role they play in really mentoring entrepreneurs, developing skills, fostering an innovation or innovative ecosystem? And maybe as Rwanda is looking at being the test bed, what can you share? What can other countries learn from you? But also, what have you learned from other countries who have looked at these sort of brick and mortar facilities that do provide maybe access to technology, but what are you learning and what can you share about these innovation hubs in Rwanda and beyond?
Thank you again. I think, as you rightly said, innovation hubs are a critical part of how we build this innovation ecosystem for different reasons. I mean, looking at the whole spectrum of support that they're able to provide, from providing startups with resources to build their products and businesses, giving them access to networks that they may not necessarily have at an individual or startup level through the different events and joint programs that they have, but also just providing a community of like-minded people that are going to inspire each other on the journey of entrepreneurship and innovation that they're going through. And hopefully, of course, sometimes we start to see some mergers happening at a startup level, given the complementarity in solutions that are being provided. So the presence of these hubs in many ways across the continent globally has really increased both the quantity and quality of startups and that one is looking at. And even particularly for Rwanda, even our proof of concept strategy that is focused on being a test bed is also understanding that even as we improve the quality and quantity of these startups, they're able to scale beyond Kigali. As a government, we've partnered with different hubs to co-create solutions in key sectors. When I talked about the proof of concept hub, One of the first initial 3 areas that we wanted to focus on is agri-tech solutions, is digital health solutions, but also fintech. And a lot of this was driven by a process that we had to go through looking at where is the venture capital flowing on the continent when it comes to technology innovations. But also most importantly, where do we see the most gaps, but the most opportunities to use innovation to drive some of the specific objectives. And so the natural candidates were agriculture, healthcare, and finance. And so this is why this becomes our initial set of even talking about these test bed type of innovations that we are creating, having a niche focus. It doesn't mean we're not open to different innovators that are coming with ideas in other sectors. It could be something in education. It could be something around digitizing SMEs, logistics as well. We'll still be able to take them on, but we also wanted to be able to say, how do we create the critical mass of saying, if you're looking for digital healthcare solutions, where are they? What kind of business, legal and regulatory environment needs to be created? And so we have that focused attention in making sure we're nurturing these specific innovators. Our approach as Rwanda has been one of co-creation within the ecosystem, as well as the willingness to be a test bed for these solutions. And so I think I did mention earlier about Babil, a digital health company, which up until today, and they've been in operation for now over 2 years, they've been able to perform about 1.3 million consultations in Rwanda. And also just making sure that healthcare is readily available for the different Rwandans. We talked about Zipline, I won't go over that, but I think the creation, the ability to attract Zipline to come in Rwanda and do a proof of concept of supplying blood to rural areas, inevitably what it created was an industry of different drone companies that came in and they were focused on precision farming type of ideas and remote, remote farming type of ideas. And so today, thanks to being able to attract Zipline, we now have at least over 8 other companies that are using the drone technology to respond to specific needs. And so all these companies, whether they were either started in Rwanda or came to Rwanda through this proof of concept channel, we have worked with them to achieve the product market fit, and now they're scaling in other markets, like you rightly said. So in my view, innovation hubs are a very powerful policy tool to orchestrate the digital transformation that we're looking for. They act as a one-stop shop where startups can, test and build their solutions. They can get financing, whether it's just even advice, training, the market intelligence that is required, the networking opportunities, but also the ability to even steer some of the partnerships, whether it's from the private sector or from the government, to be able to use the solutions that they are providing. Of course, equally important is the creation of a strong entrepreneurial ecosystem through the collaboration and networking that we have. You may have already heard of the Kigali Innovation Ecosystem or the Kigali Innovation System that we are putting together. It's really an innovation ecosystem. It started out us thinking about it as a physical location with physical infrastructure to support the innovation ecosystem. But more and more, as we went into the details of what is really required to build a truly world-class innovation ecosystem, we realized that physical infrastructure would not cut it. And so much as we already had land and we're building it out, and we're attracting, we have today 4 universities, Carnegie Mellon Africa being one of them. The key question was then thinking, how do we create other support programs around financing? Startup capital is very important. It's very difficult to find innovative, friendly financing instruments across the continent. And so being able to pull in those kind of venture capital investors that are really focused on thinking about the entire value chain of the kind of financing that is going to be required by technology startups, looking at the technology and skilling bit, which is why today when you look at our Kigali Innovation City, it's really been anchored around initially attracting some of these universities and training centers, because we knew if we're able to build this critical mass of capacity, then naturally money follows talent. Then we'll be able to attract the money that is needed to then nurture this talent into building world-class solutions.
No, that's great. That's great. Money does follow talent. I have one sort of follow-up, and then would love to close with the thought process that you said about being responsive and ensuring that yes, being a test bed is important and coming up with new things, but also being responsive. And there's nothing that has challenged the world like COVID-19 in terms of how countries have responded. And I think some of those response mechanisms have been through digital technology solutions. So just really quickly, there's a basic question from the audience around the number of hubs. How many hubs do you have in Rwanda? And actually how are they developed? Are these grassroots driven, government sponsored, international funding? So some of the sort of, I would say, the basic brick and mortar data around the hubs in Rwanda, and also just really your thought process, brief around how you have pivoted and responded to COVID, having a 5-year Rwanda master plan, and then getting hit with the reality from February, March of this year that all good plans, have to face, reality at some point. So maybe you close with that, Honorable Minister, and then I just want to say, and I will say this when you finish, but just thank you. You've inspired all of us. We know much more about Rwanda. We already were fans, but now I think all of us are looking at that entrepreneurial visa that we can apply for to come and set up shop there. So thank you, and please share your closing remarks.
Thank you. I did realize I made a mental note to talk about this. I think there's something you had asked earlier about what have we learned from the other countries, and I had made a mental note to talk about it. I think when you look at some of the leading innovation ecosystems, you're going to notice one thing: their ability to attract talent from outside their local communities. And I think we've seen it, whether it's in Silicon Valley, go to Boston. It's just that ability to say, how are we attracting the best in class talent across the world, and then just giving them the right incentives that are really going to help them to build those solutions, but also to do it in a very agile and much faster manner. And I think that has been an interesting reality for us, and which is why I like to say that when you look at the number of innovation hubs that are springing across the continent, I don't think it's a question of we are competing against a neighboring country, but it's rather what complementarities can we build? What strengths does, let's say, a country like Kenya have that Rwanda doesn't have, and how do we make sure that if Rwanda is focused on e-health, maybe Kenya is focused on agriculture, and how do we allow for that fusion of talent and ideas that will allow for scaling to happen in all our markets. At the end of the day, if we can really look at this single African market as a good opportunity for our innovators and entrepreneurs and also investors, then I think doing this together and creating those complementarities around these innovation hubs is really what is going to make Africa ultimately stand out. So back to your final question that you asked around the hubs. Today we have around 20 of them. I think I did mention earlier where we said the ratio is growing. So we have about 20 of those hubs or entrepreneur support kind of organizations. When we started out, it was more heavily government inspired, or government, those that were created through government. And this was really with the likes of the K-Lab, which was focused on the software type of solutions, Fab Lab more on the hardware. They were among the first innovation hubs that we established as a pre-incubation program, and they were really serving as a combination of both collaboration and networking space to facilitate the technology skills acquisition. But even in doing that, that's when we realized, okay, space is not enough. Let's think about financing. Let's think about tying them to a problem that's being addressed, and so we give them the ability to scale. But we've also seen over time now more like either private sector-led type of hubs, but also more and more the donor community working with us to create programs. Today we have the 250 Startups Incubation Program, which was established as an incubation program to strengthen existing innovation hubs, but also to provide services that are needed at the startup and business development stage. The digital solutions for sustainable development program. And so we see more and more of our development partners coming in and saying, we see the need to nurture innovative and entrepreneurial talent in alignment with the vision of the government around innovation. Where can we help? And so they're able to then create these support programs at the incubation level, but also bring in that much needed startup financing that is really required, that you're probably not going to be getting for a venture capital type of fund. And so I think that has also helped. And then naturally, because you have those incubation level type, pre-incubation level type of programs, then you start to see private sector led kind of accelerators coming in to then sort of create a very unique transition for these startups and innovators across the value chain. So that's what I would say is really what is happening, and we're very optimistic about this growing. The majority of our startups today are still at early stage, but I think over the years, with all these programs coming into place and structures and support systems, we'll start to see more mature companies that are coming up, but also spreading across the continent in terms of their footprint and area of impact.
Very, very, very well said, Honorable Minister. You may not be able to see all the chat, but you're getting sort of rounding applause, and you have a lot of people excited about coming to be a part of that ecosystem building in Rwanda as you're open for business. We really are inspired by your leadership. Personally, on behalf of the U.S. African Development Foundation, Rwanda is one of our shining programs across the continent, and really appreciate your partnership and your personal and professional leadership and what you bring to this. It really is inspiring. And I'll say this, privilege of the moderator as a father of 3 girls, 3 young ladies, to have an ICT minister of innovation, as a woman, is a great inspiration, not only for the continent, but for all of us around the world. So just thank you for your leadership. Thank you for sharing. Almaz, you did a great job. We got her. It took COVID-19, but we got her. Great job. Let me now turn it over to Sadia from MIT.
MIT.
Yes, go. Almaz, take over the floor.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you. Oh my goodness, CD, you're such an incredible human being. And what could be better than you interviewing this most incredible woman that we've been trying to get her for a long time. Thank you, thank you. I would like to ask you to stay if it's possible, because the panel session is coming, and then usually our attendees will have some questions. And if the 2 of you can stay, it would be wonderful. But if you don't, I understand. But if you can, please, while Saida is coming, I'm going to just go send out the poll. And I would love to ask all of you to participate so I can stop it. While you're also doing the polls, I would like to ask that those of you who are not speaking, if you could just close out your video, so that some of our speakers are having some challenges, and it would make it easier for them. That's what I have been told. But please participate in this very basic 3 questions. And you will know what we're trying to do with this is really when we do our report sometime in February of what we've learned over the last 7 sessions. February would be the month that we will launch our, share our report. We need to use this in order to reach out to potential investors, entrepreneurs, and of course, Rwanda is open. And I am sure many other countries are also open for business. But this is such inspiring and incredible way of beginning the day. I just always think of Rwanda as a place of inspiration for all of us, for the challenge that they have they went through, and the opportunities that they're open. It's just incredible, mind-boggling. Thank you. Saida, take it over. And I do believe Hurui is here. And I believe Tim is here. Nekasa, if you could just take on, and I will disappear. I'm going to end the poll in about, I think we have enough.
It's okay. Thank you, Almaz.
Hi, Saida.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be part of the ADN family again, because we met last year at ADIS. It's quite a unique way to connect with one's work, not through my job at MIT, but as a fellow African and part of the diaspora. So thank you for engaging me. For those who do not know much about MIT D-Lab, we are a multidisciplinary center at MIT. We engage in education, research, and fieldwork, which we call Innovation Practice, which is the group that I am part of, and I believe some of my colleagues are in the group here too. So our work at D-Lab focuses on developing and advancing collaborative approaches and practical solutions to global poverty issues. And we do that by delivering trainings, facilitating convenings, and also engaging in knowledge curation. And so how did we get to work on innovation ecosystems, around the world, but also particularly in Africa? I would say that initially, honestly, in our impact journey, we were very much focused on the impact of our work in innovation on the individuals. We were kind of tracking the changes of skills, of mindsets and relationships, some of the things that we heard about before, but at the individual level, so person by person. And while that change is really important to enact impact, really a few steps down our impact journey, when some of these individuals started engaging people from within their communities, their organizations, their institutions, I would say we really saw an amplification of the impact as the decisions and the strategies started impacting more people. And then a few years down the line, as in places where we stayed for a longer time, we started sensing the impact from ecosystem perspective when different organizations came together to partner and start enacting changes at a system level. So we started studying this, trying to understand how these processes kind of happen and how they evolve. And in the meantime, as most of you know, there was a tremendous increase of interest from the international development community in innovation hubs and innovation ecosystem, acknowledging the importance of creating the environment for innovation to thrive. And so national level, international level, bilaterals, we started getting pulled into convening and facilitating conversations. And so was born our local innovation research group that's kind of specialized in doing research around this theme. So to open the conversation today, I'd like to share with you a framework that they've developed, and I'll do my best to do them justice. Almaz, if you could pull it up, or I can share my screen, whatever.
Megan has it.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so it's a pretty simple framework that we've developed for understanding innovation ecosystems, but also facilitating conversations around them at different levels, with different kind of people. And so having a common language, and you'll recognize in this a lot that you heard in the fireside chat. So at the center of it, it's really the actors that are participating in the innovation ecosystem. They're represented both in terms of the type of actors that can take part of an innovation ecosystem and the functions that they may play. And different actors could play different functions. The second component of it on the bottom is the resources, and as an analogy to a natural ecosystem, those are the soil and nutrients, the things that innovations ecosystems need so that they can produce both the innovation, but also the support systems that allow innovation to flourish. And on the top, what we call the enabling environment, it's the elements of climate, the air, the oxygen, the sunshine, the things that really affect the ability of ecosystems to both produce and diffuse innovation. And so, as you heard from Paula, there are different actors that play different roles, but in the case of Rwanda, there was some very intentional actions taken to really open elements of resources, open elements of market system access, all these like the work on connectivity is, very essential to infrastructure. The marketplaces that we heard about opened a lot of opportunities for innovation in agriculture. So I just wanted to share this as a backdrop to the conversation as we started. These are very complex systems, as you can see. two things to keep in mind is that there is no one size fits all. It's complex and dynamic. And so even in the same country, they are place-based. And so different places in the same country may have different kind of ecosystems, depending on the existence or non-existence of actors, resources, and enabling environment. And so the challenges can be different. The solutions can be different. And to connect this to our theme today, really, these are very dynamic, and what enacts innovation is the connections between the actors. And so the question about partnerships and public-private partnerships. So with that, I would like to invite and welcome our panelists today. They represent actually an array of type of organizations along this spectrum. They play very different roles in this mosaic. And so, Hiroi, Nikisa, Timothy, welcome. I thought maybe we could open the conversation by broadening a little bit the horizon for our audience. We heard a lot about Uganda. We got a deep dive into the beautiful things that are happening there. Help me paint the mosaic that's innovation ecosystems across Africa from your own perspectives and your own experiences in the different countries that you are involved in. So maybe we can start with you, Nikisa. As with your role in AfriLab, maybe you can explain a little bit about that. You have a specific vantage point, right? You connect all these innovation hubs and you play different roles, different functions for them. So I'm really curious to hear from you. What are some of the approaches, unique approaches that you've seen across your network to initiating and growing innovation hubs? And perhaps also what are some of the trends?
Well, thanks, Saida, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here and to be part of this panel. I am Nikesa, and I work with AfriLabs as Director of Strategy. AfriLabs is a Pan-African network, currently 225 hubs spread across 47 African countries. And as an organization, we support these hubs by ensuring that they have relevant content or resources that they need to be the best version of themselves as they support entrepreneurs in their communities. And so this is really done through what we call our capacity building program. And so there's a lot of facilitation, a lot of knowledge sharing, really contextualized for an African audience and an African ecosystem. We also offer funding for the hubs and for their startups. We offer reliable data, and so we've got great resources online available. Most recently, we just did something with Jembe Consultants that are a marketing firm with a lot of experience with the innovation ecosystem in Africa, and we've shared some insights from African ecosystem enablers on what they're doing and what should be done for resilient innovation across Africa. With regard to what I'm seeing or unique approaches, I obviously would begin by speaking about Kenya. I am Kenyan, based in Nairobi, Kenya currently. And we have Konza City, which is a government initiative, and they describe it as powered by a thriving technology sector, superior reliable infrastructure, and business-friendly government systems. This is, if I'm not wrong, maybe about 5 years in the making. It's been a labor of love for those that have been directly involved in building it out. What I love about this project is that those involved, the government has invested a lot of time in building community and just building a lot of just having a lot of people believing in what the vision of it is. And so they've had building communities of university students. They've had tours of the area, selling the vision to all stakeholders. They've engaged seasoned innovators in several convenings to just understand, get the feedback around the development and how it's progressing. And during this pandemic period, they've actually used their time pretty well, emphasizing the importance of innovation ecosystems like the one that they're building. What's important about that is Kenyans are very outspoken. We have so many platforms. We've mastered the art of expressing ourselves, at least in the innovation space. And so there've been hard questions that have been asked of Konza City, of the government, why they're doing what they're doing. And they've really held their ground in making the case for why they feel it's important that we have a Konza City, some form of a smart city led by the government. Now, the reason there's all these questions is because the Kenyan innovation ecosystem is quite mature, relative to the African continent. For about 10 years now, there's been a lot of steady progress. We've had, I think to date, there's about 50 innovation centers spread across the country. And so a lot of the positive profile that Kenya has gotten as one of the startup capitals of Africa is really on the backbone of our innovators and the work that they've done and the stories that they've shared around innovation and what's possible in Africa. And so for the largest part, the Kenyan government, in my opinion, have been playing catch up. And so the question now is why Konza City? The innovators have done a great job, they put Kenya on the map and so on. But what we now look forward to seeing is how the government begins to complement what innovators have done within the Kenyan innovation ecosystem. And hopefully the two paths eventually align, and potentially what Konza City would then do is allow or enable the Kenyan innovation ecosystem to leapfrog. So we are already miles ahead of many African countries, but the reality is when we compare ourselves on a global scale, there's still quite a bit to be done. And perhaps Konza City is the secret sauce that enables us to begin to leapfrog and compete quite well on a global scale. With regards to what's happening across the continent and building innovation ecosystems, it's really what the Honorable Minister mentioned that's happening in Rwanda. The same thing is happening at different scales across the continent as well. We have consolidation happening, and so we have associations of hubs in different countries forming. And I think what's happening within those ecosystems is hubs and entrepreneurship support organizations are beginning to understand that if they work together, then their voices are amplified and they can begin to impact stuff like policy and so on a lot more effectively. I think the other thing that we're seeing is collaborations. There's a lot of hubs from different corners of the African continent wanting to share best practice. And so there's a lot of collaboration happening amongst our different hubs within the AfriLabs network. Just before I finish, I also want to just point out another ecosystem that I found very interesting in the South African ecosystem. And what they're doing there, to my last count, I think they had at least 5 technology hubs. It's probably more by now, I'm not sure, but they are very strategically placed. And so there's Stellenbosch, there's one in Stellenbosch, I think, there's Highveld, there's Port Elizabeth, there's Pretoria. And for me, this is a great example of decentralizing innovation and enabling different communities to build their unique solutions. And I feel across the continent, if this is something that other ecosystems can begin to do, where you begin to understand that innovation can come from anywhere, that it's not necessarily a top-down approach, then we begin to see people, not necessarily in the cities, but in other towns, in countries across the continent, innovating for themselves and innovating for their unique solutions. Over.
Thank you. Thanks so much for bringing that last point. It's something I definitely would like to go back to in our conversation later on when we talk about challenges. Hirwi, I'm curious.
Hi, Sada. Good morning. Good morning,
Mm-hmm.
everybody.
Good to hear you. Wherever you are. it looks beautiful behind you. I'm very curious to hear about your perspective, because you have kind of a unique angle here, kind of having one foot in Silicon Valley, the gold standard of innovation ecosystems, and then in Ethiopia, where you are participating both as an innovator, a startup, but also you're contributing to capacity building and building the talent capital of the country. Yeah, what's going on in Ethiopia? What's your take on it? And if you know of other ecosystems you want to add to our canvas, please do.
Thank you, Sada. And thank you, Almaz, for having us this morning. So yeah, I started my journey in Ethiopia in 2015, 16. I started visiting, and you know, Ethiopia is one of the less developed countries with respect to infrastructure and supporting kind of like the tech ecosystem, especially with respect to Kenya and, you know, South Africa, Nigeria. But, you know, where a lot of people see challenges, you know, we saw an opportunity with Gebeya. And so like Almaz was saying, I met Amadou, my co-founder, in 2000, I think it was 2015. It was the year before we moved to Ethiopia. And, you know, we met at an ADN event, and he was talking about, you know, software development in Africa. And I was invited as an investor, and we met just briefly, and we exchanged information, and we ended up kind of getting reintroduced a year later, and at which point we made the decision to come to Africa, to Ethiopia, and start our EdTech capacity building institution, you know, known as Gebeya. So 4 years down the line, we ended up closing. We closed our investment. You know, we raised 2 million from Partech and Orange, as well as Consonance investment managers in Nigeria. So we were the first tech company in Ethiopia at that time. This was actually the beginning. It was the beginning of 2020, January 2020. We officially we closed. So we became the first tech company in Ethiopia to close from international VCs and telecoms and telcos, I should say. So it was, I think, you know, more of a strategic investment also for these firms, being that Ethiopian markets are opening up. You know, telecom is opening up. There's new investor regulations that have been passed, kind of a lot of decentralization. You see a lot of regulations being passed to encourage foreign investment. So, you know, 4 years later, we closed our first, you know, our investment, and we've been seeing also there are a lot of hubs in Ethiopia. We work kind of alongside a few of them, just to kind of co-sponsor and put on events. I don't work with them personally, but I know they're definitely a good resource for students that we've brought on through Gebeya in the past, and even students that have graduated or talent that we've actually put, you know, into our marketplace. A lot of the times these ecosystems and these hubs are a good networking and just a good resource for them to find mentorship sometimes, to have a space for them to work, to have Wi-Fi. So I definitely, you know, I'm definitely in agreement of the value that they provide to the tech ecosystem. In Ethiopia, it's a little bit harder because the hubs don't necessarily have as much resource and as much government support, I should say, as much private sector support as they do in Nigeria and Kenya. There's a lot of government programs and aid for these hubs that we don't really have in Ethiopia. But, you know, they still provide as a good resource, a good networking hub for a lot of talent in Ethiopia, in and across Ethiopia. So, yeah.
Thank you, Harry. So more of a kind of a nascent ecosystem with a growing role of government. Yeah, Tim. So Tim, you know, you bring the perspective of an international agency participating in kind of a national ecosystem, but there is another aspect to the work of USADF that I think is quite unique, is that you have this focus on SMEs and focus on agriculture. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay. So I'd love to hear from Tim if he's on the line. I'm not seeing him, but I'd love to hear from you about, you know, your perspective on perhaps the unique ingredients that need to be in place so that SMEs can participate, specifically in sectors that are not tech, you know, as tech heavy, so they can participate effectively.
Okay, thank you so much, Saida. And as I've been introduced, I'm Timothy Nzioka. I'm working with United States Africa Development Foundation. And before I talk about the ingredients, I just wanted to add in terms of the different approaches. We have heard about the Rwanda case, and my colleague has also talked about several other approaches across Africa. When we look at developing an ecosystem, we are looking beyond tech hubs. We are looking at human capital. We are looking at national policy. And if I may just touch a little bit on that, and then I'll move on to give an example of some of the things that USAID is doing to create innovative ecosystems. For example, in Ghana in 2019, they set up a science, technology, and innovation policy framework. And I think we all appreciate that at a national level, having the right environment in terms of policy guideline is key. And we heard that very well from Honorable Minister of Rwanda. And if you look at human capital, in Kenya, for example, where I come from as early as 1990s, Kenya government took a deliberate decision to develop the talent, human capital, in terms of developing a curricula across the entire educational and training system, with the entrepreneurship being introduced as a mandatory course, and industrial attachment being weaved into it. And then we expanded a lot in terms of the graduate and undergraduate degrees in entrepreneurship, because this is the fertile ground that cultivate and encourage young people to get involved in innovation. But it also went ahead to set up the Kenya National Innovation Agency to coordinate and promote and regulate the national innovation ecosystem, which I think is a plus. We can now see the results of that from 2013 when this was put in place. As we talk today, there are many examples on how this has been done. And we can talk about other countries like Nigeria, which set up Startup Nigeria as a 3-month incubation program that was started last year, and it is gaining a lot of traction. But allow me to really narrow down innovation in different ways, because innovation doesn't mean that it's something very sophisticated or complex or out of this world. It can actually be a simple but useful, as CD put it. Just doing regular activities but taking them differently. If you look at milling maize with the solar power, it's an innovation when you come to look at those communities. And innovation, again, can also take place in various environments. The tech hubs that we have heard about, but it can also be done in rural settings. What does this mean to USAID? USAID does its development work differently. Unlike a lot of other traditional development initiatives that are top-down, they are expert-driven, they are exclusive. At USAID, we approach it differently. It is bottom-up. We actually invest in the ideas of the communities. We use participatory processes where projects are co-created with the clients. And we do this through 3 important interventions. First one is we deploy capital in form of grant. We deploy capacity building, and we also make connections. And then you want to understand how different is this capital that we deploy. While it is grant, we only make it to 100% African-owned and managed entities. And this is to enable lower the debt burden, but also ensuring that we are supporting the Africans who understand their problems to come up with their own solutions. But critically important, as one of our key model of development, is utilizing a network of local implementing partners across the continent who have got local knowledge. They have the expertise, and we enhance their capacity so that they remain with these innovators beyond the time that we are providing intervention. And to us, innovators are the users of innovation. And this is one of the most important elements of ensuring that you have got a critical mass of users that will be able to spur and catalyze development to the next level. So what are some of the innovations that USAID has been able to support? One of them is MasterCard Farmer Network, which we implemented in Uganda in partnership with MasterCard. And this is a platform that digitizes marketplace payments and workflows. As you'll appreciate, especially for those who work with communities at the grassroots level, most of the documentation by our rural community SMEs and farmers is paper-based. So making sure that this is digitized in ways that they can actually build a transaction history, it can be a very powerful tool to attracting external investment. Another example is an organization called Hello Tractor. And this is doing agricultural mechanization through aggregating demand. And what it does is that you have got providers of agricultural mechanization service through use of tractors, and you have farmers who require mechanization, but there's disconnect between these two. So Hello Tractor came up with a technology, and they have tested it in Nigeria. We want to expand it in Kenya, where these tractors are no longer going to be waiting to be linked with farmers, but they are pre-booked and they are installed with GPS monitoring system, which is able to collect data on where they are, their usage, and the performance on the ground. So it meets the needs of the farmer, it meets the needs of the tractor owner, as well as supporting those who are doing the booking and the tractor operators. The device is fitted with an international SIM card, which is able to store data for a month, so that if it is operating in an area with low connectivity, then that data is still safe. And if someone tries to tamper with the device, or the tractor tries to move outside of the area it is allocated, the owner can actually remotely, using remote device, even immobilize. And therefore it reduces fraud, it improves efficiency. And these are some of those technologies that you can actually look at that change the way agriculture is being done. We have Virtual City, for those who come from Kenya, which innovated a technology called Agri Manager to automate supply chain and provide transparency and integrity to both farmers and buyers. We funded initiative in Turkana. For those who know Turkana in Kenya, it is semi-arid, almost a desert, and the communities there almost 100% rely on livestock. So giving them new skills so that they can expand their income base through desert farming using solar technology backed up by drip irrigation. And we have multiple of examples of such innovations at grassroots level. So to your question, what are some of the ingredients that need to exist for innovation ecosystem to facilitate SMEs effectively participate? One of them is that there must exist a problem. There must be a need. And you know, for those entrepreneurs normally fill a gap. And innovation is not entrepreneurship. Innovation is completely different. But you innovate because there is an existing problem. But as we have heard even from other speakers, one of the other key elements and ingredient is a designated place. It could be a tech hub where you have power internet and people can come and they can meet, they can connect, they can share ideas, they can work together. And this again doesn't have to be at the capital city. It can be at a cooperative level. It can be an SME association or farmer cooperative, as I've said. The other ingredient is that we need to have an agile and open environment where community works together. They're able to learn together. There is ethos around openness. Mistakes are accepted. You tolerate risk. And then there is need for an enabling environment, level of digital literacy. And our Honorable Minister talked about that in Rwanda, and we can see the advancement that they are making. Laws and regulations that exist to provide a friendly environment, but more importantly, a clear roadmap, because if you have innovators, they need to be able to know what kind of service will they be receiving along the way. Then the other one, as I conclude, is involvement of large number of innovators and users. Because if you have an innovation and it has no users, then it is not going to go to scale. It is not going to be impactful. But as I said, with USAIDF, when you use the innovators as the users, they come up with innovation that they are going to be using. And then the last one is ensuring that you have the right tools to gather, to refine and evaluate ideas that are coming up. And you develop looking at the market instead of when you develop and then you start looking for the market. So those are some of the ingredients. And I think there is a lot that we can speak about innovation at the grassroots level, so that it doesn't just appear like innovation is just going to be done in the capital cities and it's high tech, is fancy and so forth. As long as it is simple and is useful, then it is innovation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Timothy, for your very thoughtful answer. I realize I kind of threw two questions at you all at once. You know, and thanks for bringing that. I mean, it was kind of intended. I wanted to bring this subject of democratization, that tech, you know, innovation is not just tech hubs in capitals. It's also, you know, the majority of Africans still live in rural areas, and that's where innovation is needed the most. Thanks for bringing that to the forefront. We kind of painted the picture right now in terms of like, there's a lot of things happening in different ways. You know, we talked about Kenya, Ethiopia, some tidbits about Ghana and Nigeria. I would like to kind of move our conversation to talking about public-private partnerships, right? Like going back to this image of these ecosystems and the importance of partnerships in general to enact the system to produce its purpose. From your perspective, you know, what do you think is the best place for public-private partnerships to really amplify innovation ecosystems? And again, not that that's the place, but at least from your perspective, your experience, what are some, you know, specific examples where you saw an intervention in a public-private partnership really bring the innovation ecosystem to the next level? And maybe we'll start with you, Hilary.
Thank you, Sada. Yeah. So can you ask me directly? Was the question? Private and public partnerships?
Yeah, like where do you think that they are most needed, whether it is in the ecosystem that you are in or in general in really amplifying the work of innovation ecosystems?
Yeah, so I think, you know, where I am directly working in Ethiopia, there's a lot of regulations that just make it very difficult to invest. You know, that's really the issue. So even if you have ecosystem hubs and you know, co-working spaces and all these kind of these networking hubs, if investors aren't going to come in and deploy capital, it's you know, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. you know, for a lot of the startups, for a lot of the entrepreneurs. And so those laws are starting to change, you know, slowly, but they're changing. And otherwise, it's a very tricky landscape to navigate in Ethiopia. So I think at a basic level, yeah, definitely it starts with kind of the government supporting the private sector efforts and trying to encourage foreign investment, you know, rather than kind of giving the ecosystem time to build organically. You know, you need foreign investors, you need mentorship, you need private equity, and you need the experiences and knowledge sharing from people who have done it before in other countries. And if you can't have those things, then it's very difficult to stimulate kind of that ecosystem building and to have startups that not just get invested in, but also exit and get acquired and co-invested in. So most definitely the government and private sector, the public and private sector need to work together. I think in other countries, you see, you know, the relationship, those relationships are more evolved. You know, the public sector and private sector work hand in hand, and the government sectors and ministries have budgets that they allocate towards helping co-working hubs and things of this nature. And we don't have anything like that yet in Ethiopia. So It's really, I don't want to make it seem gloom, you know, like it's, you know, like it's never going to happen, but it's just, it's a little bit more tricky to navigate. So I definitely agree with you, and I see the value, you know, it's just, yeah.
I mean, it is a journey, and that's why we're having this conversation, is really to inspire kind of change from one place to the other.
Definitely.
Nekesa, from your perspective in our prior conversation, you had mentioned some very specific places, I think, where you think that the partnership with government are essential. Could you share some of that with our audience?
Yeah, so the minister, when she was speaking, she mentioned that many times the government will be the biggest consumer of a lot of products that are made by innovators, you know, made by businesses. And I absolutely agree with that. And for me, I see this as a specific role that government could potentially play within the public-private partnerships. A couple of specific examples from Kenya. One is an initiative of the government that's called the White Box. And what White Box is, or what it was intended to be, was kind of like a funnel that fast-tracked solutions that the government needed to a space or to a place where the government could actually use them. And so basically the whole idea of agile governance and what can governments do to make it so they can use the products that the innovators are building. And the government was, I think, specifically looking for solutions around food security, affordable housing, affordable healthcare and manufacturing, which is the Kenya's Big Four agenda that I suppose ultimately plugs into Agenda 2063 of the African Union. And so how the White Box was intended to work, the spirit of it was that innovators building for these Big Four, for this Big Four agenda would apply to the White Box, and the government using its network would then get different private sector stakeholders to support these innovators to the extent that they needed. And so if they needed IP support, there's an IP organization that could support them. If they needed marketing support, there's a marketing organization that could do that, legal support and so on. And if they needed some form of incubation, then there was lots of innovation hubs within the country that had signed on offering to support these innovators. And so what that does is that it's beginning to fix this pipeline that a lot of us in the African ecosystem are missing, a pipeline of innovations so that regardless where this innovator is or is based, there's an entry point for him or her where they can begin to nurture whatever idea it is that they have. And once they're done with that initial phase, there's somewhere else they can go, perhaps an incubator, perhaps it's an accelerator. Once they're done with that, there's another stage. There's people that they can be introduced to, including investors and so on. And so for me, I felt that that white box was an example of a solution that begins to fix this pipeline where we can see the start point and the end point of innovations built in Kenya. And it was great that at the end of this pipeline, basically what the government was saying was, we're going to fix our procurement system, our rigid procurement system, to a way that it's able to accommodate these innovators, so that as government, we can begin to use the innovations in the spaces of food security, housing, manufacturing, and healthcare. So the spirit of that was great. It's faced some challenges, but I really hope that our government will do a bit more to get this off the ground. The second idea I want to quickly share is our Kenya Industry Entrepreneurship Project, which is a $50 million initiative being implemented by our Ministry of Industry, Trade and Cooperatives, with support from the World Bank. And basically what this is supporting the local hubs, the local innovation ecosystem, to build its capacity to be able to support local innovators better. So this is a great example of there actually being funding, and it's the first time that we're seeing it at such a scale, funding coming from the government, through the World Bank, that's supporting local hubs to do their work and to do it better. The final example I want to give is one from Madagascar, actually, and this is a member hub of AfriLabs. It's called Habaka Hub. Now, I think it was Timothy who spoke about some of the things that innovation needs. And yes, money helps, but there's also just that basic infrastructure. There's the connectivity, there's space, there's just having those connections to government. And for Habaka Hub, they're actually based within the Ministry of Higher Education, Higher Education and Scientific Research. And so they get connectivity from the ministry, they get the space from the community, from the ministry. They get networks from the ministry, and this is a symbiotic relationship, because whereas the ministry is focused on research, the Habaka Hub is focused on actually doing stuff. And so it's very complementary. And so that's another great example of a public-private partnership, and one that really should be, I hope could be scaled across the continent, because what a lot of hubs are suffering from now is the basics of how do we keep our lights on, how do we support our entrepreneurs. And if you have governments basically saying, here's land or here is space that we own and you're free to use it at no cost, then that is a great help to innovation ecosystems. Over.
Thank you so much, Nkesa. So I think you brought this point of creating markets, so kind of creating that need that Timothy was talking about and kind of focusing the energy around that, but also coming in places where resources and infrastructures are key to kind of moving the needle forward. Timothy, to you, I mean, the USAIDF is engaged in a lot of, countries across the continent. Any specific examples of PPPs that you think we can add to our bouquet of examples here?
Yeah, as I go to give examples, I also want to say that both the public and private have got key roles to play in developing an innovation ecosystem. And I want to look at it in two ways. One, the conducive environment that I spoke about, policy, which is the role of government, because when you do not have the right environment, then it becomes very expensive to do innovation. But innovation is very risky. We know that. And de-risking that innovation is key. And USAIDF, partly as government agency, this is one of the things that we do. Because then when you provide innovators with some investment that they can use, whether it is for piloting, whether it is for designing, whether it is taking it to scale, then the innovator can use their limited resources to do other things that may be able to leverage external investment. we know very well that government is not the best in providing services other than social and common good services or public good. So attracting the private sector to be the ones that are investing from the word go becomes critical, because then the private sector is able to do it as a business, not where the government sets the strategy, sets the ball rolling, and then the private sector is going to invest in ways that may not be profitable at the end of the day. And the example that I gave, partnership between MasterCard, which is a for-profit, because we partnered with the MasterCard, the company, not the foundation. They are looking at the innovation as a way of them scaling their business. And we are there to de-risk and bringing in the community of innovation users, because that is where USADF is very good at, and MasterCard did not have feasibility or connection with the users of this technology. And this being such a powerful and result-oriented investment, we are now getting into the second phase where we are scaling out. We were only able to reach 13,000 farmers. Now we are going for 300,000 farmers in Uganda. And this is about digitizing the entire farming community, linking them up with markets so that they produce for the market. And the market is able to tell where the produce is, what quality it is, and at what price. So this is a very important connection which brings together the private and the public. But I also wanted to say that, like in Uganda, the Ugandan government likes what USADF is doing, and they provide resources. They say for every $1 that you invest in Uganda, we are going to put in another $1. And this is able to deepen the work that we are doing in terms of scaling innovations across the country. And it is becoming the way we are looking at doing programming across the continent. And beyond, now the government, the private sector is coming in and saying, hey, we want to use our philanthropic money in ways that we can cause more impact. So can we utilize the platform and the capability of USADF? So when you look at what capabilities do you bring to bear, because we are targeting the same community, we are targeting the same, if it is SME, if it is the health sector, you come together, then you have a force that is able to have that impactful difference, that is able to implement activities instead of silos, where the government thinks that we are going to do this, then the private sector thinks we are going to do this, then the SMEs and innovators think we are going to do this. And the final bit I wanted to say is that collaboration among innovators, because you can have one innovation and someone else comes to build on that innovation. And at the end of the day, then whatever comes out becomes more meaningful, it can be scaled, it can reach more people. So that environment where there is that openness, the sharing of experiences, so that we can know what is happening in Rwanda, how successful have they been, how can we remodel that for Kenya, how can we remodel for Ethiopia and other countries. I think that is great. Saida, if you allow me, I wanted just to give one example on how innovation can actually make huge difference. In Nigeria, someone looked at the price of rice coming from India, which was cheaper than locally produced rice. And they were like, how can you buy rice from India, put it on a ship, come and pay heavy duty, pay other logistical costs, place it on the supermarket, and it is too expensive, it is too cheaper than the locally produced rice. So they came up with an innovation of aggregating smallholder farms, where small farmers who have got small pieces of land, they bring it together, they're able to mechanize, they were able to automate. They are able to bring to bear economies of scale in terms of even the cost of inputs. So efficiency improves. And at the end of the day, the production is higher. On the same piece of land, you are able to double, triple the production. So the cost of production becomes low. And because of just that one single innovation, then you are able to make the Nigerian rice to be competitive when it goes to the market. And that means a lot to the farmer who is producing because they have a ready market.
Thank you so much, Timothy. I'm taking notes here. It's really a wealth of, I think, of information, different ways into like where you think actually that PPPs can intervene, de-risking, partnering to bring in infrastructure, providing pathways to scaling, because we know there's nothing that scales more than partnership with governments, capacity building, this role of coordination, which is really important, like really bringing that ecosystem around one purpose. And then, what Hilary said, kind of opening a door for more, like for investors and capacity builders to come from abroad. So thank you for painting this kind of canvas of what's happening across the continent. As you could hear, is things are happening differently. There are also different approaches in terms of PPPs to contribute and amplify this innovation. Now, I'd like to move the conversation to challenges, because my next question is about how can we engage the diaspora in solving some of these challenges. So I want you to maybe focus on the top challenges that you see still hindering the growth, the development of innovation ecosystems in the context you are working in, but also probably in other places on the continent. And whoever wants to take it first.
I'm happy to go first.
Okay.
So, I mean, like I mentioned right at the beginning, one of the core things that Affilabs offers is reliable data. And so we spend a lot of time talking to our innovators, our hubs, to understand the status quo at any one time. And late 2019 into early 2020, we actually did an internal needs assessment, which supported us in figuring out our programming for 2020 and beyond. And so what came out of it was some critical challenges that the hubs were facing. And I mean, there are several, but I want to focus on three. One is sustainability, which we've spoken about already on this panel. Really for hubs to do their work, to be able to keep their lights on, to give quality support to innovators, they still are struggling to figure out what is that sustainability model? What do I need to do to enable me run my operations and give quality support to innovators every day. And this, for some, the solution is in hybrid models. And so they offer consulting outside of being spaces for innovators. They have consulting services to corporates and so on. And so they're still figuring out. So it's still a big issue, the sustainability issue. Second is contextualized support. One of the things that has plagued us as an African ecosystem sometimes is that we import curriculums, we import other ecosystems' ways of doing things. And that doesn't always work for us. We say entrepreneurs are the same, but the opportunities are different. So because of things like accessibility, infrastructure, skill, we may find that it won't be one size fits all, even across the African continent. And so finding, being able to do that assessment of every innovator that you're supporting and finding what is that customized way that you need to support them where there is more impact is still something that our hubs are struggling with to some extent. And then finally, mentorship and coaching support. a lot of people, or there's a lot of organizations who we don't always hear about, who are doing such incredible work across the continent. But there seems to be a disconnect with some of them and the innovation space. How do we get a lot more of them sharing their experiences, sharing their best practices, sharing the mistakes that they made that we shouldn't make again, so that these innovators can grow, not just in terms of the product, but in terms of the maturity of the way that they think and the way that they strategize. And so a lot of effort right now is being put around coaching networks, building alumni networks for hubs, but it still poses a challenge where we still need to figure out what is the value that we offer to people that are not immediate members of the ecosystem, that we can draw them in to want to share their stories. And honestly, I hope that I get some of the answers on this call. Over.
Yes, thank you so much. And I want to just make a call to the audience. As we're going to these challenges, I mean, my juices are already kind of going in terms of like, we can do this, we can do that. So as the diaspora community, I would invite you, as you hear these challenges, to start thinking about how might you engage and share with us in the chat. I'm speaking on behalf of Almaz, correct me if I'm wrong, no commitment. I think it's a forum to really connect needs and offers. So thank you so much, Nkesa. I think these are really good opportunities for diaspora communities to, you know, either contribute or bring in models that they have seen in other ecosystems and work with local actors to contextualize them. And I'd love to have a conversation with you also on behalf of D-Lab after this. So moving to probably maybe Timothy this time, I'd love to hear from your perspective, what are the key top 2 to 3 challenges that you think are still, you know, hindering the development of innovation ecosystems in Africa?
Okay, thank you. And I want to connect that with the diaspora, which is the platform that we are using today. When you look at the diaspora that wants to implement or to try innovation or to scale innovation back, especially where they have got roots, there's disconnect between the demand and supply. They have got the ideas, they know what they need to do. They understand some of the problems their communities back home are going through. And they therefore do not even have a way of getting to start. How do you are working in the US, you are working in UK or some other places, and you want to implement an innovation in some rural setting in Malawi or in another country. There is that disconnect because they do not have trusted and reliable partners who could be the platform for use for that innovation. And as USAID, we have seen this, and we are working with the high net worth individuals who would like to implement programs in Africa. And because of the brand that we carry, that we are able to vet implementers at the community level, then we become a channel where we are not only making that connection, but we are at the same time facilitating the development of impactful programs, ensuring that there are clear objectives, there are clear activities and expected output. Now, the other thing that Nkesa talked about, which I just want to make a small addition, is that when you look at innovation, it requires a lot of many things. The mentorship, the talent that she talked about. And a lot of our innovators do not have all that packed in one place. They have the innovation, but they lack several other capabilities. And one of the things that they lack is, where do they access this support? If they don't have access to the tech hub, which is established, because how many people will be able to access those tech hubs? They can only accommodate that number of people. So trying to see how that connection can be made so that people with innovation are not constrained just simply because they do not have the skill that they require to move it to the next level. And the final challenge that I wanted to speak about is that a lot of times innovators try also to become entrepreneurs. And we know that innovators are not necessarily entrepreneurs. So an innovator getting to that point where they know they have done their bit and now they need to offload this, whether it is to sell the innovation or to bring others in the system so that it can be scaled. And that is why a lot of innovation have not seen the day of light, because someone then keeps that innovation to themselves. They do not open it up to others who may bring in the entrepreneurial spirit so that it can be scaled to the next level.
Thank you, Timothy. Definitely the question of access is something, at least from our perspective at D-Lab, something that we see and strive to contribute to the solution. So how do you extend this opportunity and these services to second-tier cities, rural areas where access to these innovation hubs that have the services, mostly in capitals, capital cities, it's very difficult. And, I foresee also that this movement from innovation to entrepreneurship, I'm curious about having a conversation with education institutions like ours, who also have to deal with that, within institutions, a lot of innovation happen. Moving them to entrepreneurship is a whole other story. So last but not least, here we would love to hear your thoughts. And because we're running out of time, also your thoughts about how might diasporan be able to contribute. Yourself kind of being between the two countries, I think you can bring a very valuable perspective.
Yeah, I was just messaging Almaz. I was telling her ADN should create a platform to leverage their network, to connect diaspora and investors and everybody. But I think
that, Harold. You're in trouble.
Sada, it starts with the diaspora. You really have to want to. It starts with the mission, your vision. And what really drove us to start Gibea and to come back home, I should say, was the vision to educate and empower other Africans, our fellow Africans. And so that vision, that kind of vision was greater than any kind of, hurdle that we accomplished throughout our few year stretch trying to fundraise. So I think that's what it starts with, of course, because there's a lot of diaspora who come and don't make it also. They don't find their co-founder, or they have maybe a great idea, but they don't have the determination past monetary, gains or things like this. So they don't really last, in the landscape, because African landscapes are very fluid. We change the landscape. That's why we named our company Gibea also as a marketplace, because that's how the continent moves, and that's how you have to be able to pivot and kind of adapt. So with respect to encouraging diaspora to come and connect, there isn't really a platform yet. If there was a platform attached to kind of a networking or a nonprofit like this, it would really be a great asset to both communities alike, the diaspora community trying to connect back home, and also people back home who are trying to connect to diaspora, because there's a lot of hubs, there's a lot of ecosystem hubs, like they've been speaking about, that don't have the right mentorship or a lack of mentorship. People come and go. And so there are a lot of diaspora who would love to be engaged in things like this, but there's no way to connect the two. When diaspora, a lot of the times are trying to come back to Africa, they're just looking at, what they have, from a resource perspective, because it's a lot. It's a big commitment to quit your job, or to take time, even to take time off in the States or from wherever you are in the world, take time off when you have a job and just to go explore. It's very difficult. You have your burning cost at home and all these things you're worrying about. So I think an innovative solution would be for someone to create a platform that would bridge the two. But you know, you have to leverage some sort of network or be in partnership with some diaspora organizations. And I think that would be really, you know, it was just coming to me when Tim was speaking. I was like, man, this would be a great idea if someone just created.
But there we go. There is nothing better to close a panel with than a good idea and a call for action.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. Right now, the way it is just you have to know somebody, Sada. You know, you have to know somebody.
Yeah.
Hey, my friend is starting this business in this other country in Kenya, or this. Oh, let me connect you with them, and you know, ping them on LinkedIn, or here's their email address. But it's really hard to kind of you know, to kind of align also. But if someone had created some sort of platform, you could put everything up there, you know, where you're from, what you want to do, what country you want to go to, or what country you're, so, you know, just some,
Can I just say this? We must not be doing a good job. And if we're not, I really feel bad, because if you go to the African Diaspora Network website and it says join us, you get insight and you have all of that already in place.
No. Listen, what I'm saying is more of a
funding to get it done.
I mean, to be a part of the network is great. You know, we're all part of the network, but I'm talking about something more refined, because so for instance, when diaspora are traveling, you know, when you're trying to go back to whatever country you're trying to go back to, there's a lot of things that you're trying to figure out, and a lot of things that, for instance, you want to know before you leave. And you can connect directly, but to have a more thorough, refined platform to be able to list like a profile, kind of like to be able to create a different kind of profile, more in depth. You know, so maybe refining the ADN model a little bit. I don't know.
And you know, without ADN, we wouldn't even be here having this conversation, Alma.
Of course,
so something right you're doing. So just to close, because I know we went over time, I want to first of all acknowledge this idea and offer, Almaz, if you want to continue the conversation, I'd love to be part of it. But most importantly, thanking Nekesa, Timothy, and Hiri, who have brought a wealth of knowledge and perspective to this conversation. I hope the audience from the diaspora and all across the world are leaving with a better understanding of what's happening, the challenges, and where there might be opportunities to contribute. So thank you, Almaz. Thank you, ADN, for allowing us to, you know, open this conversation today.
Thank you, Saida. So good to see you. And Saida, there is a next step for you. And action is, we'll talk to you, Megan and I. We'll have you look at what Huri is talking about, which we believe we have it. So I want to make sure that we take that as an action step, because I think it's very important. I keep asking this myself, you know, we send newsletter and all, but the problem is, how do you get them to know the platform? We do have an online platform. So Huri, thank you for bringing that up. It's on us. And I will reach out to you to see that how can we make it what Tim, Nekesa, and Huri.
Happy to help, yeah. Just so you have more success stories. Success stories. Otherwise, the process takes a long time, you know?
You're impatient. I know you very well. But listen, I do admire the fact that you are an exemplar diaspora, because you took risk to actually go back to Ethiopia and continue to go back and to really advance this thing that Tim was talking about. So because it's not easy for diaspora to just close out everything they have and then move. That's not an easy thing. So I think we need to create a system in which we will enable each other and enable the community. And that's really the essence of ADN. But then we have Huruis everywhere. And then how do we make it easy for them? So I really think this was a fantastic conversation, which really would allow us to continue the conversation and also to continue to better ourselves, to better the systems that we have. The lucky thing about ADN is we are completely surrounded by brilliant people. And Said, I'm coming to you soon. Michael and I will come to you soon to ask for your help and see what can we do to make the platform that we have, which has about 1,200 people, to make it even more accessible, much more what Hirui and what Tim and what Nekesa are talking about. So I think there is an opportunity for that. I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. I really appreciate for taking another 10 minutes, but I am also encouraging you to join us in November. This thing doesn't stop. So in November, we are so honored and delighted to have my wonderful mentor, wonderful funder, our board member, Agnieszka Winkler. She will be leading a fireside chat with Patrick Awuha. If you know Ashesi University and you want to hear inspiring leader, you got to join us. We have Kofi Appenteng, the leader of AAI, Africa America Institute, based in New York. They're doing incredible work. Of course, my wonderful friend, Stefan Eloy, she is now the head of Digital Africa in Europe. And Diane Kwame, she is from MasterCard Foundation. We have one more person that we're waiting to confirm. But why is this important? Because we need to continue to have these conversations so that we can create what Saida called this big mosaic or a picture of what is possible. And then the gaps that we don't know how to do, we will always seek for help. But at least we need to have this conversation. And I'm very grateful to all of you. Some of you who want to stay for networking, we are open until 10:30. And then for those of you who want to leave, we want to thank you. We want to thank again the Honorable Ingavire and Sidi and Hirui, Saida, and Tim, really for great conversation. I wanted to make sure that I've also mentioned everyone who is speaking. Nekesa, thank you very much. And our participants, what can we do without you? We've had the highest number of participants as always, and I appreciate each and every one of you for being here with us. So I will close out we'll stop right now recording and we'll go back to the networking.